All right, hello everybody. So last week I talked a little bit about wizardry and other CRPGs that were kind of bigger in Japan than they were in the US. And today, and also I think I'm going to probably do a couple more videos on this, um, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the Ultima series because this is one of those series that really kind of captured my imagination as a kid. And as I got older and as I was able to get get copies of it for PC, as opposed to the original copy that I played for on Nintendo of a port. It's just one of those things that kind of interests me as a writer. The way that writing for a game differs than compared to, say, writing for a piece of straight up you read it fiction. So today we're going to talk about Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. This is the fourth game in the Ultima series, but it was a big change from what had been up until then, right? The the first the first proto Ultima game was actually called Akalabeth, which is it's one of the stories that goes along with the Silmarillion. But it was basically a fairly straightforward dungeon crawler that Richard Garriott wrote, and it was published. I think he even self-published it at first, like just kind of putting discs in a bag kind of thing. And then Ultima 1 was kind of a more complete, more graphically interesting kind of adventure. It had both significant top-down portions as well as some first-person dungeon stuff going on. But there wasn't a whole lot of story to it, and there wasn't a whole lot of immersion. You would get in and you would play, and there would be a couple of characters here and there to talk to, but mostly, the game was building up money, exploring dungeons, getting a couple of artifacts, passing time so you can get to the part of the game where you get a spaceship, stuff like that. Ultima 2, I never played much of. I've only ever played the PC version, and that version is incredibly difficult to play. But what I will say is that the notable thing about it is that it appears to take place on the surface of the Earth. That is, in the there's multiple different times that you play in that game. But if you get to the present time-ish one, the map is basically the world, and that one also has space travel and stuff. Ultima 3 narrowed things but also broadened them. Ultima 3 introduced the four-person party, right? You would have four different characters that you command, and it got rid of a lot of the spaceship, sci-fi stuff, and went for a more grounded, a little bit more, lore consistent kind of medieval world to play around in. The game Ultima 3 is called Exodus, and Exodus is like the big bad guy, and you go through this long adventure, but it's a pretty standard, role playing, not even role playing, but it's a pretty standard, it's almost like because there were games like Wasteland that tried to be very immersive, whereas Ultima 3 Exodus was a little bit more, almost you'd call it like a JRPG. It had more in common gameplay wise with a Final Fantasy than it did with a Wasteland or something along those lines. And it's a fun game. It's also very difficult. But when Ultima 4 came out, Richard Garriott tried something completely new, something that people probably had fiddled with, but hadn't done it to the extent that he did it before. And what he basically did is he tried to make something that was very immersive, that would capture the player kind of as himself or herself, but also as a migrant to this world of Britannia that he was creating. And he continued this trend with the character that you play in Ultima 4. You can take that character and introduce that character to Ultima 5 and Ultima 6. In Ultima 7, you play a simplified version of that character. Same is true in Ultima 8 and Ultima 9, right? So this character that you start in Ultima 4, at least in theory, kind of follows you through the whole rest of the series. And that's not the interesting thing that Garriott did. What Garriott did was he tried to make a game that was not just a hack and slash adventure, like Exodus kind of was. Most of these hack and slash adventures, they have a lot of combat, a lot of grinding levels or attributes or money or whatever for your characters to make them stronger, and there's a few puzzles here and there, but all in all, the game kind of hinges on the combat, right? And I mean that from both a mechanical as well as like a story perspective. You're fighting a giant monster of some sort. I'm oversimplifying, but Exodus feels a lot more like a JRPG than like a Wasteland or something else like that. But then we have Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. And this is the first. This is in addition to making the game not so based on combat. There is combat, and you can't avoid combat in the game, but there's a lot more to winning the game and being the good guy than just winning at combat. And in a lot of the simpler RPGs, killing evil things is all you need to do to be a good guy. Richard Garriott tried to turn that on its head. He created a world that was based on, or was trying to make itself so that it could be based on, a system of 8 virtues that Garriott put together. You have what is it? Honesty, compassion, valor, justice, honor, sacrifice, spirituality, and humility. Right. So you have these 8 virtues. And the goal of the game is not just to, fight your way to the big bad guy and take him out. The goal of the game for your character, and this is one of those things where it's not trying to make it so you can role-play however you want to play and win the game, right? That's a different style of role-playing game. This game has a distinct goal for your character, but the goal is for you to kind of think about and figure out the way that you go to that goal on your own. Right? You can't win the game of Quest of the Avatar by being a bad guy. You have to get those virtues, up to maximum. But at the same time, there's a lot of leeway for where you explore, when you explore, how much combat you get into, how much you focus on one virtue over another kind of thing. And these early Ultimas, 3, 4, and kind of 5, were all ported to the NES, which is the first place that I experienced them to a certain degree. And it's worth noting that if you play the NES versions, they're not only are they stripped down in terms of gameplay elements, but they are also stripped down in terms of story. And so actually starting to play the PC versions of Ultimas 4, 5, 6, etc. really gave me an interesting... it really pulls you in a lot more. Based on kind of a short and interesting story hook, as opposed to, here you go, let's go do this. Just to give a comparison, if you play the NES version of Quest of the Avatar and you start a new game, you get a prompt that starts like this: "We have been waiting for you a long time. I can see into your future. I shall foretell your destiny. Listen carefully." And then you get into the basically the class selection thing, where you answer a lot of questions about which virtue you favor over another. Now, the PC version does an amazing job of trying to immerse the player, and I think that's what I want to focus on here. So we're going to go through the intro to Ultima 4 real quick. I'll have pictures up. And I'm just going to kind of read what you get when you start a game of Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. Here we go. The day is warm, yet there is a cooling breeze. The latest in a series of personal crises seems insurmountable. You are being pulled apart in all directions. So right here, we've got a couple of things happening. Number one, we're setting a physical stage for the player, for the character that is the player. You'll notice that there is a reference to you straight up. This is something that you can easily do in a game, but can't so easily do in a book or something like that. But it's very effective. It's telling you, it's setting the stage for you to put yourself in the position of this character, right? And it's also, very relatable in a way. You've got the latest in a series of personal crises seems insurmountable. You're not just some random person walking around. You're some person who is particularly like disillusioned or disgruntled with the current state of your life, right? And this is something that, back in 1980, whatever, that, would have related to a lot of people who were computer nerds at that point, right? All people that are kind of, to be a computer nerd in the mid-1980s was to be a bit of a misfit. And this is kind of playing on that assumption that you have things that are pulling you in directions that you don't care about. That's why you're looking for escapism in the form of video games. So let's continue. Yet this afternoon walk in the countryside slowly brings relaxation to your harried mind. The soil and strain of modern high-tech living begins to wash off in layers. That willow tree near the stream looks comfortable and inviting. The buzz of dragonflies and the whisper of the willow's swaying branches brings a deep peace. Searching inward for tranquility and happiness, you close your eyes. And here is where things get a little weird. A high-pitched cascading sound like crystal wind chimes impinges on your floating awareness. As you open your eyes, you see a shimmering blueness rise from the ground. The sound seems to be emanating from this glowing portal. It is difficult to look at the blueness. Light seems to bend and distort around it. While the sound waves become so intense, they appear to become visible. The portal hangs there for a moment. Then, with the rush of an imploding vacuum, it sinks into the ground. Something remains suspended in midair for a moment before falling to earth with a heavy thud. Somewhat shaken by the vision, you rise to your feet to investigate. A crude circle of stones surrounds the spot where the portal appeared. There is something glinting in the grass. You pick up an amulet shaped like a cross with a loop at the top. It is an ankh, the sacred symbol of life and rebirth. But this could not have made the thud, so you look again and find a large book wrapped in thick cloth. With trembling hands, you unwrap the book. Behold, the cloth is a map, and within lies not one book, but two. The map is of a land strange to you, and the style speaks of ancient cartography. The script on the cover of the first book is arcane but readable. The title is The History of Britannia, as told by Kyle the Younger. The other book is disturbing to look at. Its small cover appears to be fashioned out of some sort of leathery hide, but from what creature is uncertain. The reddish-black skin radiates an intense aura suggestive of ancient power. The tongue of the title is beyond your ken. You dare not open the book and disturb whatever sleeps within. You decide to peruse the history. Settling back under the willow tree, you open the book. You read the book of history. No, really, read the book of history. And here we have, so let's examine what we got so far. You've got a character that is you, someone who is disillusioned and a bit of a misfit, someone who is trying to find some kind of inner peace or some kind of difference in the world and is disillusioned with what they've got today. We have something that's totally reasonable, going out and taking a walk to kind of calm your nerves, sitting down under a tree, and then we have an interruption. And here's the hook. We have this blue portal that appears and then vanishes. You don't walk through it yet. No, not yet. Nothing like that. But what happens is that the portal seems to drop into the world some tchotchkes, some merch. And in fact, I don't have one of these for all of these, but I do actually have to have a copy of Ultima 4, the original, this is the original Atari version. But it's not really relevant which version you have because all of these versions nowadays are kind of, you generally would play it on PC, although I do have an Atari 800 that I could probably try it on. But it actually came with, a cloth map. It came with some books. It came with a metal ankh necklace thing. Here's the history of Britannia, and it's not a nothing book. There's a lot of text in here. And actually, some of this text is important to helping to complete the game. And so you actually do need to read it at some point. Here we have my slightly worn, I believe this is a spell book. Or no, this is a spell book. So it's got all the different magic spells in it. We've got the metal ankh. And then we have some things that kind of break the fourth wall a little bit. We have the Quest for Clues book advertisement. Player reference card, the actual discs themselves, stuff like that. Now, this is another really good way to immerse the player, because what you're doing is you're basically saying to them, there are things that you need to know that are in this book of history in particular, and, if you read it, it's going to help you out later in the game. In fact, it does. I forget which quest it is in the game, but there is some quest where it's like, oh yeah, the information that you need to complete this quest is partly in game dialogue, but it's also partly in the book of history. So not only has the game kind of put you into a position and given you a thing to do, given you some items to look at, and actually encouraged you to look at them specifically, but it's also kind of immersing you by making you kind of relax and spend some time looking at a book rather than just tapping really hard on the button and advancing the screen. So let's continue with the text here. Closing the book, you again pick up the Ankh. As you hold it, you begin to hear a hauntingly familiar, lute-like sound wafting over a nearby hill. Still clutching the strange artifacts, you rise unbidden and climb the slope. In the valley below, you see what appears to be a fair. It seems strange that you came that way earlier and noticed nothing. As you mull this over, your feet carry you down toward the site. This is no ordinary traveling carnival, but a Renaissance fair. The pennants on the tent tops blow briskly in the late afternoon breeze. The ticket taker at the Ren Fair's gate starts to ask you for money, but upon spotting your Ankh says, "Welcome, friend. Enter in peace and find your path." The music continues to pull you forward amongst the merchants and vendors. Glimpses of fabulous treasures can be seen in some of the shadowy booths. These people are very happy. They seem to glow with an inner light. Some look up as you pass and smile, but you cannot stop. The music compels you to move onward through the crowd. Through the gathering dusk, you see a secluded gypsy wagon sitting off in the woods. The music seems to emanate from the wagon. As you draw near, a woman's voice weaves into the music, saying, "You may approach, O seeker." You enter to find an old gypsy sitting in a small curtained room. She wears an ankh around her neck. In front of her is a round table covered in deep green velvet. The room smells so heavily of incense that you feel dizzy. Seeing the ankh, the ancient gypsy smiles and warns you never to part with it. "We have been waiting such a long time, but at last you have come. Sit here and I shall read the path of your future." Upon the table, she places a curious wooden object like an abacus, but without beads. In her hands, she holds 8 unusual cards. Let us begin the casting. So, we've now immersed the player. We've given the player a scenario to put themselves into that is relatable. We've given them a hook. We've given them We've given them some time to kind of allow themselves to detach from the real world and immerse themselves in the game. And now we've given them a test. And the test is a fairly simple one. You are asked a series of questions about different virtues, and you're asked which virtue you put up over the other. And the interesting thing about the virtue thing in the PC version is that, yes, the virtue names are in the answers, but they're not like super prominent necessarily. In the NES version, you get A button is honesty, B button is compassion, and and it's a little more heavy-handed. But what have we done here? What has Richard Garriott done here? He has created, a very immersive, a very gripping page and a half of text that basically brings you into the world of the game, kind of allows you to calm your nerves, and then allows you to start out on this adventure that you're going to be playing through. And what we're going to see in later videos as I talk more about later games in the series is that, the character that you play, the adventure that you have here in Quest of the Avatar, kind of carries forward into the character that you end up playing in the later games. Right, we know that your character from Quest of the Avatar, can be moved on to 5 Warriors of Destiny and then moved on to 6, which is the False Prophet. After that, things get a little bit kind of compressed in the sense that you don't get to pick all the different stuff. The Avatar has a specific face now and is either a man or a woman, but that's kind of it. In 4, 5, and 6, you can kind of choose from a variety of, or at least in 5. In 4 and 5, there's no physical description of the Avatar character, But in 6, you get to pick from a couple of different hair colors and like facial styles and stuff, as well as being able to choose, male or female. And then in 8, Avatar is basically just a dude. In fact, it's a dude that you never see. But then in 9, we get back to the kind of the Ultima 7 Avatar character, at least aesthetically. So, yeah, this is one of those things I wanted to highlight, is that one of the great powers of narrative in video games is that you can involve the player in a more direct way than you can in a book. If I was just reading the novelization, or as I showed you guys last week, the manga version of Quest of the Avatar, there's no reason for you to necessarily immerse yourself into that so much. You're reading a story about someone else. But here, in this game, you have been encouraged, not forced, but encouraged to kind of put yourself in this position. And you've been given a position that's not crazy. You've been given a position that's fairly reasonable, fairly relatable, and then they give you the story hooks, and then the mysticism kind of comes in, and you find out, okay, now I'm in Britannia. There's no point. I guess I didn't play through the whole. I didn't play through the whole. Virtue question thing. I just played up to that point to just to kind of get the feel for it. I'm pretty sure that you never actually walk through a blue portal to get to Britannia in Quest of the Avatar for PC. What happens is that you finish the questions and then the incense smoke kind of surrounds you and you end up in Britannia, right? But that's kind of something that I thought was worth talking about is number one, how a game can uniquely bring you into its world. And number two, how literally a page and a half of text can do a great deal toward pulling you into a game. Because, it's more text than that technically, because if you did it right, you read the history book, which is another 20 or 30 pages. But you could hypothetically skip it, but you're going to miss out on the answer to a quest for later on. Anyway, that's what I've got for today. Probably do one episode of Ultima stuff a week for a little while just to kind of get through. Next time I'll talk about Warriors of Destiny, probably. Warriors of Destiny is one of those games that I didn't like when I was younger, but playing through it later on, it actually became a lot more interesting because it is actually more difficult. And again, we're going to have some cool story stuff to talk about because this is something that I haven't mentioned that well. Those 8 virtues that I mentioned earlier, right? They're integral to the game of Quest of the Avatar, and they're integral to the game of the future Ultima games as well, in a variety of ways, which is kind of interesting. But in Quest of the Avatar, it's really interesting how what he's trying to do is he's trying to create a world that is trying to. It's a world that has a particular moral structure, right? And I'm not trying to say that in a sense of applauding it or necessarily or denigrating it or anything like that. But what we're going to see is that one thing that we learn as we get later into the Ultima series is that other worlds have other moral structures. And that's another interesting story point that we're going to get into in Ultima 8, specifically Pagan. I think that's all I've got for today. If you haven't ever played the Ultima series, you can play 1, 2, and 3 all you want. Go for it. They're fine games. But if you really want to get into what I consider to be Richard Garriott's masterwork, you're gonna want to definitely play Ultima 4: Quest of the Avatar, and it's pretty easy to find these days. I think it's even free on GOG, and there's even there's versions of it that are designed to run in modern Windows without playing with DOSBox and stuff like that. And you could of course emulate the Atari version or whatever you want. But there's a lot of different ways to play this game. It's a really interesting game to play. Make sure to bring a notebook along because you're going to want to take notes if you're going to try to play through it without a walkthrough. Because there are a lot of really complicated and kind of confusing things to deal with, and you're gonna want to remember what quests and what things you need to do to check off your list, kind of thing. And it's a little hard to do so from inside the game interface by itself. yes, you can tell how many runes and stones you have. No, you're not going to have a thing to tell you what the different mantras are and stuff like that. But it's a cool game, and it really, if you let yourself be immersed by it, it does a really good job of kind of immersing you in a world different from your own, which is the part of it that I really find compelling from the perspective of a writer. Like, it's amazing to me that this page and a half of text, what effect it had on, younger me when I first started playing this game on, the real version of it. And it's worth noting that even the NES version was compelling, but like the addition of this little bit of text to me really pulls me in because it does the things that the NES version doesn't do, as we saw. So again, that's all I've got for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And see you next time. Not sure what next video is, but I'll try to do something tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, then probably Wednesday. We'll see. Anyway, have a good one. See y'all later.